Yo, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to the using the Metasploit framework. This is the third video in the series. There's going to be four. The only reason is because we're going to get through all of the main stuff today, and then the additional features, I'm going to make it its own video so I can take the right time needed to do that. So if you guys are liking this content, if you guys do like these videos and want to keep seeing me do Hack the Box Academy, hit that like button, hit that sub button. Make sure you guys give it some love because that's the only way I know what you guys like and what you guys don't like. All right, let's get into it. One thing I will say before we get into it is a lot of people, I'm getting a lot of confusion. People are asking, well, how come, you don't do more videos? How come you don't, or not more videos, more Hack the Box Academy videos? How come you don't do the paid ones and things like that? I'm going to just be honest with you guys. The reason, and then I get a lot of questions too that how come I use their workstation versus I don't just use my own operating system, because then I could pump out more videos because the workstation only allows you to do it once a day. All that is because I want this channel to be accessible. And what I mean by that is I want people to be able to watch what I do, go hop on Hack the Box Academy and do it. I don't want people to have to be stuck looking at what I do and then go to try to do it and they're stuck behind a paywall. So I try to do everything I can do to make it free. So not only free, but also repeatable. What I mean by that is this workstation is the same on everybody's. So you can load that workstation up, follow my steps, and you can learn from it. You don't have to jump through hoops to make it work. That's the reason. I know not everybody likes that or agrees with it, but some places and some people in other areas of the world don't have access to pay for this monthly. So this is a way that allows them to make it accessible. So let's go ahead and hop into it. Enough with the ranting. Okay, so setting up the database. So if you guys don't know, Metasploit uses database, PostgreSQL. And you can see, you'll see this a lot with people that have used Metasploit a lot or use it a lot. They'll go ahead and start the PostgreSQL database beforehand. You can see sudo system control start PostgreSQL. They start it. It just makes it a little faster. You don't have to start it beforehand, but the thing is you can control a lot of the databases and you can import and export the databases as well. So that's what we're going to cover here. So you can see they went ahead and started the database. Now that's going to start up before you even start up Metasploit. And then you can see they're starting it up. The database Metasploit framework database, starting it, boom, boom, boom. And you can see it's going to load this by default. This is the configuration file, user share Metasploit framework config, database.yaml. And you can see that they're kind of walking you through some of the errors you might see. If your Metasploit's not up to date, you'll get an error. So you need to update it. And then you'll just use the apt update. So if you do get these errors, make sure you just update your Metasploit and then you'll be fine, good to go. Make sure you're using sudo. I see that issue a lot where people don't use sudo and then they don't know why it's not working. You need sudo permissions. And then they're initializing the database. So you can see it says database already started. That means, hey, you're good to go. It's already started, right? So the reason they give you this information is because you can configure it to load different databases. So you can change that configuration file. And you could say, hey, I don't want you to load the default database. I want you to load this database I have over here. So that's good because let's say you have a database set up a way that you like it. Who knows? Maybe you've got all of your history of a pen test, whatever you got on there that you really want. You can just transfer it over and it'll load directly to that database. You don't have to sit there and try and re-enter all the information. You can also import databases too as well. So you can see, you can check the database status. So that will tell you if it's running, if there's issues, all of that good stuff. So now, once we've already initiated the database, but once we initiate it, you can see it's going to do the default schema. Again, you can change all that. That's all they're really telling you here. They're showing you how it works on the back end so that if you ever need to change it, someone says, hey dude, check this database out that I got a bunch of good information from this pen test and you're on their team or whatever, and they send it over to you, you know how to load it. Okay. So now you can see here they've got when they do the Microsoft, or I always say MSF, I say Microsoft, Metasploit framework database. When you run it, you can see it says database already started and it runs for you. So that's good. That means it worked. So now you can see if, however, we already had the database configured, not changing the password, proceed with these commands. So you can see here, here's the commands they're telling you to do. Reinitiate it, copy So you see they're copying the configuration database to their home directory, okay? And then they're restarting the service. That's fine. This is just telling you some back end troubleshooting and stuff like that, because you will run into these issues, especially if you're starting the database manually and things like that. So they're just telling you how to reinitiate everything. Okay, so then you have help database. As soon as you are in the MSF console, you can use the help command. And if you do help database, you can see you get some different help commands rather than just your help. So if you just type help, you'll get a whole list of commands. Here, if you just type help database, you get all the database commands. Okay. Using the database. This is something I don't see enough people doing. I think this is extremely underutilized. And I think it's because they watch a lot of YouTube videos, and a lot of YouTubers, including myself, don't do this in their YouTube videos. And the reason for that is because we're doing this temporarily. What I mean by that is if I'm doing a CTF or something, it's temporary. I'm not wanting to save it as a workspace. If I'm doing a pen test, I'm absolutely saving it as a workspace because I do need to save it and be able to pull from it later. So you want to go ahead and you can see workspace, it says default. You can say workspace add target 1. So what this is if you've ever worked with databases, this is basically a schema that you can set up where basically what it's going to allow you to do is save all of your stuff in this target 1, whatever you name it, right? And then that way you can work on this. Let's say it's one machine, you're working on it, boom, boom. And then you add a workspace for another machine and you work on it, boom, boom. And they're on different networks or something, right? You can work on them separately and it's not going to be an issue. You can change, the global settings and it's fine. You can change this, it's fine. You can change settings and change different things. You'll see why it's important later, because as you progress through Metasploit and use it correctly, you're going to start building lists of host names, services, different vulnerabilities that you're taking over. You're going to have, in a large pen test, you could have hundreds and hundreds of machines that you have all the information for. You want to save those under one thing. You don't want them spread out, and you want to be able to call on them later. So, all right, and you can see, you can type workspace tac H, which is universally help. So workspace help, and it gives you all the different commands for it. All right, here's what I'm talking about. Importing scan results. So you can see, if you just look at a nmap result, cat, target, nmap, it's just it's showing you, hey, here's all the target nmap results. Cool. But if it's an XML file and it's properly formatted, you can say database import target.xml. And you can see that's actually pulling all the hosts and then all the services. You can see it actually imported, and now when you type hosts, you have a host. When you type services, you have all these services that it's already found for you because you import it. So this is a good example I like to use for this is when you're actually doing a pen test. I will say most, because not everyone, but most people do not do pen tests alone. So when you're doing a pen test with your team, let's say, hey man, this is a 3-week pen test. I'm on week 1. I got to take leave. I got to get out of here. My family had something happen. Here's what I've been working on. Boom. Here is my entire scan results, all that. Everything I have. Here's my database. You could then take it and import it into yours, and boom, you have all of the information he has. Now, don't get it confused. If you import this into your workspace, it will grab everything from whatever they were working on and pull it into your workspace. This isn't the same as a workspace. A workspace is a completely separate entry. This is importing results from an entry. And the reason that's important is because I've seen people go, okay, I'm working on this network over here, and then this guy was working on this network over here, and they're separate, but he gave it to me and I'm like, oh, I'll import it and then I'll have 2 networks over here, right? No, it's going to import it all into yours. So keep that in mind that they are a little bit separate. Just understand the difference. But when you import these results, it is extremely useful for working in collaboration. It's also useful if you're transferring machines. Some people use virtual machines. Some people use, maybe they're working on their home machine. They have to travel, so they're working on their laptop. They can transfer those databases and not have to redo all that work. Okay, so now using nmap inside MSF console. So everyone's pretty familiar with meterpreter, things like that. But what most people don't realize is that you can actually use nmap and all of that directly in Metasploit. And what I mean by that is you've seen a lot of people that will go in Metasploit and they're working and they'll just type nmap that's not running on Metasploit. What that's doing is Metasploit has a feature where if it doesn't understand a command, it runs it on your host, meaning it runs it on your machine. So you're just running nmap on your regular computer like normal. That's different than if you do database nmap. What database nmap does is it actually is running nmap, but it's saving those results. So it's saving them. So you notice he runs nmap on this IP here, and then it adds it directly. Here's his hosts. He now has a host with that result. And services, it adds those services. So now when you actually query the database for hosts and services, you get those results. So it saves it for you. You don't have to save them, okay? It's really, really nice. It's really nice if you do it correctly, organize it correctly. What I'll say is this is where you'll see good pen testers and great pen testers. You'll see the difference. And what I mean by that is there's plenty of good pen testers that do this as well. I'm not hating on anybody because some people do it differently. And so this is not throwing shade at all because some people like to write things down. Some people like to have it saved somewhere else. But great pen testers, you'll notice they have things organized so well that they never get confused. I shouldn't say never. They don't get confused on things. And what I mean by that is if you have your databases and your schemas and your hosts and services and all this broken down properly, they don't get confused. They can pivot around. They can run their C2. They can do everything they need to do on their host without being confused. Whereas amateur pen tester will say, might start importing all these results and everything, and next thing you know, they've got all this information sitting here, and they don't have it organized properly, and it might be on different networks, and it's kind of confusing, and those are the type of things that you got to be careful for. Okay, so here is how to export it. So it says data, it's for backup. It can be for backup as well. It's also for the same purposes I was telling you before, to import it somewhere else. But you do want to have backups of everything, especially if you're doing a pen test, because if you're getting paid for 2 weeks work, because that's what you told them it'd take, and you lose all of your information, guess what? You're still only getting paid 2 weeks work. They're not going to pay you 2 extra weeks because you lost all their data. So you have to fix that. So that's why you want to make sure you can export the database so you have backups. Okay, now it's showing you hosts. So the host command displays a database table. Okay, we know that. So if you type hosts, there's always a help menu. Just keep that in mind, always a help menu. And it tells you what you can do with them. But the biggest thing is you can list your hosts, and it saves them all for you. Services, same thing. It'll list them all for you. Credentials, same thing. So what this will do is it'll show you all the credentials that are stored, okay? This doesn't necessarily mean cracked credentials. It means hashes, okay? So it's going to save all the hashes that you get too. This is really nice because sometimes when you do hash dumps, if you have the right permissions and are in the right location, you can get thousands, right? So if you get thousands, it will save them for you, and you don't have to try and figure out, okay, how am I going to start taking these over here, and da-da-da. They're directly saved into a SQL database that you can pull from later, which is really nice. Okay, loop. So loop command works in conjunction with the command above to offer you an at-glance own services. So what it does is it takes all the information you've given it, and it shows you kind of what you've taken, if you will. So what I mean by that is it's going to show you the vulnerable services. It's the ones you already taken over. It's going to show you hashes. It's going to show you everything that you've already, basically your treasure, right? What you've already gotten. It's going to show you all that. Okay, so let's go to the next and complete. All right, so now we're going to start getting into the hands-on portion. So plugins. Plugins are pretty self-explanatory. Plugins are third-party tools that people create and they import, and they're all created in Ruby. So they work in Metasploit. A lot of people create Ruby scripts and tools for Metasploit. And basically they're showing you here, if you put them in the proper directory and they are an actual proper plugin, meaning they actually work with Metasploit. Just because you write a program in Ruby doesn't mean that it's going to work with Metasploit. So keep that in mind. But if you have a proper plugin or you download a plugin, for instance, like Nessus here, you put it in the correct plugin directory, and boom, you have another plugin. And you can see here, like here, they're showing you load Nessus. So there's the Nessus one. They load it, and boom, now they have a new help menu with all of the new Nessus plugin help commands. So that's really nice. It's really nice. Now you can see if you say load plugin that doesn't exist, you get an error, right? pretty self-explanatory. Hey, failed to load the plugin from here because it doesn't exist. Pretty self-explanatory. So now when you install a new plugin, again, you're going to go ahead, like this one here, they're doing Metasploit plugins. They're taking Dark Operator's Metasploit plugins, which are good. They're cloning it. They're showing all the different plugins that he's got here. And then they're going to go ahead and copy them into that Metasploit plugin pentest.rb. Why do they do that? Because now when they do that, they can just load the pentest. You can see load pentest, and boom, now they have all these extra plugins sitting here. Now, one thing too, if you ever see this MSF console tac q, that just means quiet. What it's going to do is you notice it didn't give you the whole like display, the random picture that Metasploit shows you and all that. It didn't do all that. That's all it does. It gets rid of that. Okay, and you can see here's some of the common plugins, but you can see that most of them here are pre-installed. Dark Operators is a list of plugins, so don't get confused. That's not just one plugin. It's that list that they showed you up above. Okay, and then mixins, they're just explaining why Metasploit was designed in Ruby and why it works well for what we need, because it can have the mixins in the way that it loads. Okay, so now sessions. This is another very common thing that you're going to be working with. Sessions is exactly what it sounds like. When you take over a machine, whether that's with Metasploit or meterpreter, or a regular shell or whatever you do, it's going to be saved as a session. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky, and that you need to understand is when you have sessions, number one, the connection's important that you see it or that you know what's going on, because when you start pivoting, those connections change, right? Number two, the other big thing is you can have multiple sessions on one host, one machine. Now, the reason for that, let's say you have a meterpreter session here and you're logged in, but you're in a local or you're in a regular user account, and you escalate your privileges to a root or NT authority system account. That will open a new session. So now you'll have one session that is your regular user account and another session that is your NT authority account. So keep that in mind, that you can have multiple sessions for different users. But you can see if you want to interact with them, meaning you want to actually pull up the meterpreter session or the shell, you say sessions tac I to interact, and then the number of the sessions. So if you type sessions, it gives you this information to show you what sessions you have open. Then you type tac I to interact, and boom, you have these sessions. Now, sessions are different than jobs. The reason they're saying this is because let's say you have a shell with something on port 1234, whatever, and you close it. Okay, you close that session, that port is still open. Okay, that's what they're saying, is you can't use that port now. So let's say that port is a well-known port that you need to use for something else. You can't use it now. That's why people create them in jobs if needed. So jobs, when they're closed down, they're shut down, right? They're done. Sessions, they're ready to be started back up. We'll just say that. That's the easiest way to understand it. So you can see here with jobs, you have a help menu just like anything else. You have an exploit help menu just like anything else. But what you can do is you can say when you run a job or when you run an exploit, instead of typing exploit and just leaving it and let it run, you type exploit tac J, and that'll run as a job, meaning that you can just shut it down, force it to run in the foreground, whatever. You can just control it a little bit more and actually kill it. You can kill it 100%. So now you can see if you type jobs tac L, it lists them, and this is all in the jobs help menu, so don't forget that. And you can see here's the jobs. It's the same, not the same, but it looks the same as your sessions. The difference is it tells you, okay, you have an exploit, multi-handler, you have a generic shell, you don't have the meterpreter shell, and you can see they list it. So perfect. Okay, so now this is, we'll go ahead and exit this, clear this. This is the later one, and we'll go ahead and spawn this target system. So you can see we're going to, and then we're going to cover this one here in a minute. So I'm doing this on their machine or their box, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to, I'll go ahead and close these because these are for later, but the reason I'm doing that is because I do want to actually have, whoops, okay, I do want to have this where you guys, like I said, accessible, where you guys can all access it. I want you guys to be able to pull up this box yourself and do it. I don't want you guys to have to try and do your own machine or try and download the VPN file, which I actually think is a great way to do things. The problem is if I do something on my parent operating system and you do something on your Kali box, it might be different, and then you might have issues and say, hey, I don't know why this is working, and I can't really help you directly because I don't know what's going on, what the difference is, because I'm not on your machine. I can't troubleshoot it directly. So that's kind of why I like to do these boxes on their machines. Okay, so now we have this 10.129. So the target has a specific web application running that we can find by looking into the HTML source code. What is the name of the application? Okay, so what we're going to do, and you can see I already did it earlier. I did it right here. You can see I went to their website. Now, you'll see some people will do nmap right now to see what web application do they have running. They told me it's a web application, so I went straight to the website. That's just how I do it. It's not necessarily right or wrong. So now here's the website. It's got nothing here, but it does say look into the HTML source code. So I view page source, and you can see right here it says lfinder 2.1.53. Anytime you see that version number, usually right before it is what the service or what the program is. So you can see the web application running is lfinder. Okay, perfect. So now find the existing exploit in MSF and use it to get a shell on the target. Okay, so we'll pull up our Metasploit and we search lfinder because that's what the name of the application is. And we've got a couple. So first things first, I'm always going to look for excellent. That's the only thing I'm going to look for. And then this one has a command injection. So that to me, and it has it right here. To me, this is my best bet. Exploit, command injection. So I'm going to use 3. Okay, so now we need to show options. And you can see the L host is 10.10.14.46. That's correct. So we leave that. And if you guys don't know why, I went right here to look at it. That's the only reason I switched screens. You can see the L port. Doesn't matter what the port is. The R host is 10.129.203.52. That is correct. Now, the reason this is already set, guys, is because I did this before. If you guys don't have any of this stuff set, you're going to have to set it. So you have to do that with set and then whatever your option is. I don't have to do that because I already did it. So you'd say set R hosts and then whatever your IP is, and that's set the R host. So that's how you do that. So it looks like we pretty much got it. So we can just say go ahead and run it. All right, commit. It's sending. Everything looks good so far. One thing I'll tell you too is make sure you check that L host because mine was defaulting to the attack box's default IP, which was not the VPN IP. So keep that in mind. That I had to change it to get it to work. All right, so meterpreter session 4 opened, and boom, we're good. So we have right here. And now find the existing exploit in MSF and use it to get a shell on the target. So we got our shell, we're good. Now, what's the username of the user you obtained? So we say get UID, user ID, and www.data is our username, www.data. Okay. The target system has an old version of sudo running. So, okay, so it has an old version of sudo. Let's go ahead and say sudo tac v. This will tell us the version. Okay, so because it didn't give it to us, we say shell. We need to go into the machine and do a shell. So we say sudo tac v. Okay, and it looks like it's sudo version 1.8.31. So now we just say... go here and say sudo version. Actually, we're not even going to look it up. We don't even have to. We can exit and go back into our meterpreter. So we're going to control Z. That's going to background our meterpreter. You can see it says, do you want a background? Now, keep in mind, you need to remember the session for ID, whatever your number is, ID. Now, we're just going to say search, and we're going to say sudo, and the version was 1.8.31. And boom, we've got an exploit right there. So we say use 0. Okay, now show options. We need to make sure we have the options set. lhost. Okay, now see, here's what you got to watch. The session here is set for 1. That's not what we want. We need it 4. So set session 4. Okay, and then we hit run. And it says it's running but couldn't be validated, so it's going to try because it says it may be a vulnerable build. So it will try. And there we go. Now, remember what I was talking about earlier. Now Meterpreter session 5 is open because now it opened a new session. So you can see it's going to open a new session. Now you can see we're Meterpreter, but when we type get UID, we are root now. So what do we need to do? We need to go to cd root. Root, and that's where I'll say this, that's almost where always the root flags are, and you can see flag.txt, so cat flag.txt, and there you go. Sessions are sweet. There's your flag. There's your flag. So it's that simple. I know I went through a lot there, but if you need to, slow it down, back it up, and just look at what we did. It was pretty simple. We just kept doing searches. We kept looking up, trying to figure out different things that are vulnerable, and then finding how to get through them, right? Now I'm going to run through the bottom here and start that session so we're not waiting next time. All right. And then we're going to say, okay. Excuse me. So now we're going to go through what is the Meterpreter payload. So you keep seeing Meterpreter pop up when a session gets started. That is a Meterpreter payload. It is its own special shell that Metasploit creates. And it has some uniqueness to it that is different. It allows you to do different commands and things, but it also is going to walk you through how it works. It's important you know how it works because if you're a defender, guess why it's so easy to detect Metasploit when someone that doesn't know advanced techniques is using it. This is why. So the Meterpreter payload is a specific type of multifaceted extensible payload that uses DLL injection. So right off the get, it's DLL injection. So we know we're looking at DLL injection. That's huge because right now here's our attack surface before. If someone's using Metasploit, now we know, okay, now boom. We just need to look at DLLs now. There's still a crap ton of DLLs. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying. Now we're starting to narrow our gap because we understand how it works now. Okay, so then it says right here, ensure the connection to the victim host is stable and difficult to detect using simple checks. Can be configured to be persistent. Yep, we know all that. So here we go. Let's see. To run Meterpreter, we only need to select any version of it from the show payload. So basically what it's saying is when you're choosing what your vulnerability is, you always say show payloads, and it'll show you that you don't have to choose Meterpreter session. You can choose just a regular shell, but that's how you select it is by saying show me the payloads and then choosing the Meterpreter session. Now, it does have it execute the initial stager, and then it calls back, so that's one way that it works, and then you have the DLL, and then here where it gets kind of tricky. It says it establishes an AES encrypted link over a socket, sends a GET to Metasploit. It says, okay, yep, and configures the session. Now, the reason that's tricky is because once the session's connected, it's encrypted. So we don't know what's going on once that session's connected. That's important to know. Now, here's where it gets a little bit crazy, we'll say. Or not crazy, but this is where you got to start looking. There's a couple things that you can look for to detect things, right? So even if Meterpreter has that encryption, there's a way to detect it. So lastly, Meterpreter loads extensions. Okay, so it'll try and load privilege. If it gives admin rights, that's fine. All these are loaded over AES, so again, it's going to be encrypted. You're not going to see that. But what you are going to see is, if I thought it said something about the services. I apologize. Okay, yeah, so right here. You're going to, here's what I was looking for. I'm sorry. Okay, so stealthy. Meterpreter, when launched and after arriving on the target, resides entirely in memory. That's perfect. That's good because it doesn't reside on memory, so it doesn't write anything on the disk, so your hard drive won't have anything written to it. So that is stealthy, right? That is. No new processes are created. Again, harder to detect, but injects itself onto a compromised process. Why is that important? And can perform process migrations. Because let me tell you, the one way, if a hacker hacks into my network, I know it's Metasploit without anything else. And this is so simple. It's just so simple. let's say you inject yourself into the Notepad process, right? Does Notepad ever launch PowerShell by default? No. Does LSASS ever just randomly dump all of your hashes? No. Right? These are, now LSASS might pull hashes, but not the way that it works in Metasploit. These are the ways to notice Metasploit. Your processes are doing things that it doesn't make sense or shouldn't be doing. So if you understand Windows processes the way that you should as an attacker and a defender, you would understand pretty quickly. You may not know what they're doing because it's encrypted, but you know that it's Metasploit and that you're attacked. That's half the battle, understanding that it's an attack happening. So yes, it's stealthy, but if you know what to look for, especially if it's an inexperienced pen tester or hacker, it's super easy to detect. Why? There's default ports it uses. There's default DLLs it uses. There's default naming conventions that it uses. Everything by default on Metasploit is so detectable. But if you're smart, if you know Metasploit advanced, you can stay undetected and use it very, very well. So keep that in mind. That Metasploit, while a lot of people don't, it's controversial because a lot of hackers say it's just point and click hacking. It is, but you will get caught 100% of the time because it's so detectable. And the reason I say it's so detectable, I know they're sitting here telling you it's all these things, and it is, but the problem is as they update, what do you think antiviruses and endpoint detection and all of them are doing? They're updating it as well to match what meterpreter's doing. So you have to know how to get around that. And that's where the advanced techniques come in that this box doesn't talk about. And that's fine. I don't want to talk about it here. I'm just letting you guys know that if you try to just do these things that they're showing you onto a machine that you don't have permission on, you will be caught very quickly. Okay, so we're back to using meterpreter. They already covered this, but the database nmap, that's an nmap scan using meterpreter. So you can use that once you have a meterpreter session. And boom, you see that you have database nmap results that you can call on later. So now we look up some information about the services running on this box. Specifically, we want to explore port 80 and what kind of web services are hosted there. They're just showing you that they went to port 80. And it says, we notice it's under construction, nothing web related here. However, looking at both the end of the web page and the result of the nmap scan, we notice that the server's running IIS 6.0. Okay. So now they do some research and they find that CVE right here has a Metasploit module for it. And here's the Metasploit module. So they search for it. Boom. They use it. And then boom, they have an exploit. We did that. You saw us do it, right? That's what they did. They went and they did some research, found that, hey, this is vulnerable and has a Metasploit module for it. Went back, searched for it, and started using it. Now, configuring exploit and payload. We've already covered this. I'm not going to cover how to set R host and L host again. You guys can read it, and I showed it to you, and I'm going to show it to you guys again. Now you see get UID and then process migration. So you can see here, they're just showing you here that you can interact with the target. And then session handling. So process migration, if you guys look, you go to processes, and then you can migrate to any of these processes, and we're going to show you how to do that. And there's a reason you need to do that, because Microsoft fixed hash dump a few years ago. Well, fixed it where you can't do hash dump from any process. So LSASS is the only one that can do it. You just have to migrate into LSASS. I'll show you that. So if you guys are trying to do hash dumps on CTFs and stuff and it's not working, that's why. So now session handling, you can type BG to background a session, or you can do what I did, which was Control Z. It will do the same thing. It backgrounds the session. And then you can go through and you can look for different modules. So exploit suggester, this is a post recon module. So what that means is it's after you've already taken over a machine, post, and then it does recon. So it looks on the host and tries to find what you can do to take advantage and exploit your, or advance your privileges. For some reason, I couldn't think of escalate. That's the word I was looking for, to escalate your privileges. So you can see that's what we did earlier when we said set session. So you're setting the session for an active session. That's a post module. Now, privilege escalation, again, that's the same thing that I was talking about. It's taking your regular user and upgrading it to a admin user or a root user or NT authority system, etc., etc. Hash dump, you can see they just do hash dump here, but they don't talk about how it doesn't work on a lot of them, unless you do LSAS. So you can see LSA dump secrets is similar, but a little bit different. It gives you a lot more information. And you can see hash dump, LSA dump SAM. There's difference. You can see the difference. And then you can see dump secret gives you a lot more. It's going to give you every secret, not just the hashes and not just the different things like that. So let's go ahead and hop into what we need to do. All right. So find the existing exploit in MSF and use it to get a shell on the target. Okay, so we got to find the existing exploit. So we're going to say nmap, and now I'll show you guys the difference here. 10 dot, if I can type, 129.215.134. Now, watch when I run this. You notice it's ran here, and it's still green. But now when I type hosts, you notice there's no database connected. It's because I never set up the database before. You have to set up the database. That's what they showed you at the beginning. You had to set it up. But when you set it up, you have to run that nmap. You'd have to run the database nmap, or else it wouldn't run anything. It wouldn't save it. But you can see here we have something on port 5000. Okay, that's odd. So let's do nmap tech sv to try and get some more information about it. And we'll see if it gives us a little bit more information about what that is on port 5000 before we try and figure out what we need to do. And you can see that it's going to take a little bit longer because we are asking for the service version. But this is important that you understand how to do that, because if you just did a regular map scan like I did, you're going to get the same results. So now 5000. Okay, so it's HTTP. So up here it didn't tell us, but here it does. Okay. So it's HTTP. So that means I can just go here and I can say HTTP 10.129.203 or nope, .215.134, and then I can say port 5000. And you can see I can go to it and instantly it's loading, but the first thing I'm getting here is 40 logger. I don't know what 40 logger is, but let's see if Metasploit knows. Okay, so clear. So now we'll say search 40 logger. Not sure what that is, but there is an exploit for it. All right, so let's say use 0. Okay, show options. Okay, so lhost is correct. That rhost is incorrect. So set rhost 10.129.215.134. That's the rhost now. We run it, and it should give me a shell here. All right, and you notice meterpreter, it says 6 now. We're on session 6, so it opened a new session. So what was the username of the shell you obtained? So get UID again, and it's NT authority system, which means we already have root access onto this machine, which is really nice. So now it says retrieve the NTLM hash for the hack the box student. Okay, so let's just do hash dump. Oof. And you can see operation failed. So there's a couple different things we could do. We could go back the way they did it and run a different hash dump, basically. You can see we could do the LSA dump secrets. We could do LSA dump SAM. We could try that. Or this is the way I like to do it. So we'll just go to processes, PS, and we look for LSAS. If we can find it, there it is. And you can see the process number is 640, right? And you can see that's process ID versus parent process ID. So we've got process ID 640. So we say migrate to 640. And you can see it's migrating from 136 to 640. Okay, it migrated. Now we do hash dump. And boom, there's our hash. Now, one thing you're going to have to do here, and just keep that in mind, is I have a hair all over me. But one thing that you have to do here is right here, you have to separate. Now you notice this hash I have down here, much smaller. Why? For those of you that don't know how to read hashes in Windows, and that's fine, there's old landman hashes, and then there's new NTLM hashes, which aren't super secure anyway. But you can see hack the box student. This is the old landman hash. This is the new hash. Now, one thing to keep in mind, you notice these are all the same, these landman hashes. That's because they're empty. There's no actual information there. So keep that in mind, that if you see that, that's always empty. Not always, I'm saying that specific one is empty. If you see that specific one, it's empty. That's important to know, because if you're doing a pen test and you get all these hashes and you're like, oh, I got a bunch of hashes, they might just be empty. So you need to make sure you know the difference between an empty one and not. The other thing is, if it's empty, the landman's empty, but the NTLM is good, that means they have landman disabled. If the landman is not empty, that means they don't, which means it's extremely insecure, so you can take advantage. So you're just going to copy this part, the CFA, boom, 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 right there, and that is your hash. And that's it, guys. That marks it complete. And then this is the, you can see here, the additional features that we're going to cover next time. So hopefully you guys like this. Next video will be the additional features, and we'll knock those out and kind of go over some of the things, especially like MSF Venom and intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, evasion, all that stuff. So hopefully you guys like it. Hopefully you guys like part 3? Whatever part it is. We're going to go ahead and say part 3, I think. But anyway, if you guys are liking the content, make sure you guys like and subscribe, because again, the liking of the video is the only way I know what actually you'd like, because I'll be honest with you, I thought it would be based on views, but it's really not, because some of the videos that I thought wouldn't get very many views has a ton, and then some that I think this is the one that's going to get a lot of views because it's super exciting, they don't get that many. So I only go off really likes, because I don't know what else you guys actually like, because again, I don't know if it's the algorithm or how it works, but that's just kind of, views can't be relied on anymore. So hopefully you guys like it. If you do, like the video. Also subscribe, because we're almost to 5K. Thank you guys, and hope you guys have a great day.